Hey guys, my phone rang. So I was talking about the importance of African unity, and I wanted to explain it so that Africans can understand why it is that African unity is important. From the first African country that got independence, Ghana, Kwame Nkrumah, when he became president of Ghana, made it very clear that Africa was not going to have total independence unless all African countries were liberated and until all those African countries became united to form one complete force. He went on to explain why African unity was important and why we cannot be independent without African unity. Kwame Nkrumah stated that Africa was divided, what he called being balkanized, into 52 or 54 little country states that would be manageable to our colonial masters. They would be manageable in that they can be divided into little territories that a few Europeans can administer at one particular time. Number two, these territories would be small enough that even if they have resources, they would not be able to achieve economic scale because they would be unable to bargain with their resources. You have to understand that if there's 52 or 54 countries in Africa, when a European nation comes to negotiate for resources, if you refuse to give them the best possible price, they have the option to go to 53 other countries that can offer them the same resource at a cheaper possible cost. And because of the European education system that we were given in Africa, competing with one another is something that they inculcated in us. So it would be natural that if they can't get resources cheaply from you, your next door neighbor would be willing to sell it cheaper to compete with you. And Kwame Nkrumah said this competitiveness, this us offering resources at a cheaper price than our neighbors, is destroying us. And he also went on to say, not only will you be unable to bargain for the prices of your resources, you would also be easy to isolate, easy to victimize. So a small little African country with bauxite or something with platinum, like for instance a Congo with uranium, it would be difficult for Congo to refuse with its uranium because the United States, as they did in the past, will send money, rebels, to destabilize the country, to cause the government to be caught up in wars with rebels while those rebels also take the uranium. Sometimes they'll even overthrow the government. Right now, 14 African countries are still colonized by France in Africa. They belong to the Central Franc Union, in which they continue to give their reserves to the French Reserve Bank to keep in order for them to have their money interchangeable with the French franc. When any resources are found in those countries, the France automatically takes 85% of those resources. France, when it goes to war, those countries have to offer their soldiers to France. When those countries have factories, when they want to buy any goods and services, they have to give first option to buy goods and services from France. That is still colonization. And Kwame Nkrumah said, we need to get rid of our borders. We need to be totally united as one, where Africa is governed by African interests. Africa is governed by a council of African leaders in order to ensure that European nations cannot continue to enslave our people, cannot continue to control our resources, and cannot continue to control our markets. What it is that Europeans need from Africa is simple. They need your resources, and they need them at the cheapest possible cost. They need your labor, and they need it at the cheapest possible cost. And after they've paid you the peanuts for your resources and your labor, they want to be able to sell you their products that are made in their factories so that they can take the little money that is left within you and they can make a profit, leaving you with nothing. They also need to ensure that whatever little money they've paid you for your resources and your labor comes back to Europe so that you are not able to develop savings to develop your own factories, your own industries, and your own capacity to have your own central banks and your own insurances that will allow you to start processing your own resources. So Kwame Nkrumah said, if we want to get to a point where we start to have our own factories, if we want to get to a point where Africa has the capacity to start providing products and solutions for its own problems, we have to unite. We have to stop being small little markets. We have to form one cartel that sells our resources at the best possible price, stop competing with each other, start cooperating with each other. And those little territories that don't have resources, the ones that are resource poor, countries like Malawi would also be able to be bolstered by those that have a lot of resources, like South Africa, Zimbabwe, Congo. So right now, the situation we have in Africa is one where we've got little borders. Rutendo comes to South Africa, Rutendo goes to Congo, they ask him, what are you doing here? Go back to your country. But when Rutendo goes back to his country, who is exploiting the resources of the country he's been chased away from? It's Europeans. Europeans are allowed to trade in Africa. They're allowed to take our diamonds, our gold, our resources and own them, control them and mine them. But Rutendo is not allowed to come to South Africa, to go to Congo, to go to Botswana and work. Only white men have that right. That's part and parcel of the problem of borders. Borders allow us to look at each other as separate. They allow us to discriminate against each other as Africans, stopping us from trading with each other. Yet for thousands of years, our ancestors traded among each other. Hence, we had no poverty. Today, we have poverty because as Africans, we cannot trade our resources because we are supposed to leave that to be the domain of white people, Europeans, to trade in our resources and take our resources and externalize the profits overseas. We need to wake up and understand that. And this is what Kwame Nkrumah did not want. So when Rutendo speaks about South Africa, I have every right to speak about South Africa. Because until South Africa is free, until South Africa is economically emancipated and the economy is controlled by its people, Africa will be in poverty. All of us will be in poverty. Until South Africa is free, what was stolen from my ancestors in Zimbabwe, what was stolen from their slave labor and their resources that ran to South Africa, will always benefit South Africa without benefiting the Zimbabweans from which it was robbed. Today, South Africa is also having economic decisions that it has to make. If we are not careful, South African money, resources, and capital that has been stolen will run from South Africa to Mozambique and Zambia unless we start having a unified economic policy that says that whenever Europeans who have made money off our continent, who have made money by pillaging our ancestors, enslaving our ancestors, and owning our resources, we have to ensure that they leave our revenue, they leave our capital in our countries. That can only happen with African unity. Because if there's no African unity, if you continue to compete against each other, the money that has been stolen from South Africans, from the ancestors of South Africans, from mothers and fathers of South Africans, will run to another African country, impoverishing South Africa, making it look like Africans can't administer and manage themselves. And then it goes to another country to make that country rich. That is only making ourselves suffer from our own resources that are being stolen from us. We need wisdom. And that's what Kwame Nkrumah told our leaders 60 years ago. Now, let me tell you the significance of Kwame Nkrumah talking to our leaders 60 years ago. For Africa to have total independence today, for there to be an African Union, it was Kwame Nkrumah's strategy for the freedom of Africa. For African countries to get independence, a blueprint was written by Kwame Nkrumah on the strategy, financing, and techniques to achieve independence through the gun and to achieve independence through negotiation. He was successful to ensure that in 45 years, all African countries were independent because of his strategy. But his strategy did not end with political independence. It was supposed to end with economic independence that was going to come by African unity. Kwame was unequivocal that Africa will not achieve independence. It will not achieve total independence if it does not become united. Instead, it would be able to get rid of colonialism and only go into a new form of colonialism called Neocolonialism. And he said the difference between neocolonialism and colonialism is at least colonialism put all the responsibility of developing African countries on the European countries that were colonizing. But with neocolonialism, Europe will meddle with your country, meddle with its policies, meddle with its ability to make wealth for its people, while all the responsibility for the failures goes upon your leaders. Because you will not see the hidden European hand. You will not see the hand of the Europeans that is isolating your country and its resources. You won't see the hidden European hand that's making you get the lowest price for your resources because you're competing against each other. You will not see the hidden European hand that threatens you with military invasion, that threatens you with destabilization by funding disgruntled people to become rebels and to destabilize your country. You will not see the hidden hand in Congo that continues to destabilize Congo while the resources of Congo continue to be pillaged in order for Europeans to get them at a cheaper possible price. But if you get rid of neocolonialism, if Africa becomes united, if you become one market, if you start saving and trading among each other, if you start selling goods in a billion people market, if you start developing industrialization because you're selling your resources at the best possible price so you're able to make a profit, if you start able to save your profits and your resources are not controlled by foreign nations, by Western nations, you can develop savings that can bring up investment banking, that can bring up insurance for the continent. And with insurance and banking and savings, you now have money to invest in industrialization. You now have money to invest in development. Currently, you can't do that because as separate little nations, all of you are too small to develop banks. So what happens is that the banks that develop in Africa are European financed banks. Europe puts in its money because you are too small a market to make your own banks. South Africa today, as the richest country on the continent, does not have black banks. Its government saves money in banks that belong to white people because of policy that have been made in that little market by Europeans in order for them to make that little market viable. Yet, with the resources that are in South Africa, with the development of infrastructure, financial infrastructure, economic infrastructure, black South Africans have the capacity, like what Muziku Malo is doing right now. He is the biggest gold miner in Zimbabwe. From South Africa, he took his capital into Zimbabwe. An opportunity was available in Zimbabwe, and he became the biggest gold miner there. Such opportunity can be opened for other South Africans if they allow us to become a united continent. The problems that people laugh about in Zimbabwe, South Africans always pointing Zimbabwe this, Zimbabwe that, that's opportunity for you as South Africans. If you have the capital, if you are black, and you have the capital, you have an opportunity to penetrate Zimbabwe. Instead of allowing the whites, ShopRite owners, Pick and Pay owners to take up all the opportunity on Africa, this is an opportunity for you, the black South African. Instead of laughing at Zimbabweans, that's opportunity for you. Come and open these solutions. You are laughing at the roads in Zimbabwe. Open a company that can develop roads, that can build roads. Partner with Zimbabweans, partner with Zambians, partner with other SADC members to form companies that can offer solutions to the things you laugh at. Let's also learn to accept payment systems that are suitable for us as Africans. If we don't have capital, then it's fine. Bring your company to manufacture roads in Zimbabwe and then get that concession to mine platinum. Get that concession to mine diamonds. Get that concession that will allow you to own land that will get you payment in other means. Payment in real wealth. We've got to be creative as Africans as to how we're going to do this. But this separation, this Rutendo can't come to South Africa to look for capital. Capital which also was stolen from my ancestors and went running to South Africa. Capital that was stolen from my ancestors when Africa was partitioned is stupid. Because what we are doing is we're excluding each other from trading with each other while allowing Europeans to continue to just take all the opportunity. This is the thinking Kwame Nkrumah wanted us to have. And when we call ourselves educated, but we still think a 50 million people market in which Europeans are taking out 70% of the wealth, if we think that's prosperity, we are not thinking. If Zimbabwe has got opportunity that is sitting but can't be exploited because Zimbabwe is under sanctions, yet South Africa has got capital, and we're not allowing that capital to come into Zimbabwe, we are not thinking. When Congo is under war, under duress, because the US and the West want to keep it isolated, want to keep it destabilized so that they continue to exploit its resources without anyone else in Africa exploiting it, we are not thinking. And if you need to understand, part and parcel, the major reason why Zimbabwe was put under sanctions is not taking land. They were put under sanctions because of fighting a war in Congo to liberate Congo, to stop Congo from being manipulated by rebels that were being financed by the West. Mugabe tried to bring stability in the region by putting his troops in there. He had done it successfully in Mozambique. The Boers, the Afrikaners had put weapons to finance war in Mozambique. Mugabe put troops there, and those troops quenched that war to bring stability to the region. Till today, there is peace in Mozambique because of Zimbabwe's intervention in Mozambique. Mugabe tried to do the same thing in Congo. And to a certain extent, Kabila wasn't overthrown because of Mugabe's intervention there. But the West was not happy because it doesn't want the region to be united. It doesn't want the region to be at peace because then they won't have access to cheap resources. Africans, we've got to understand this. Cheap resources is what the West wants from Africa. Destabilization in Africa, a lack of unity in Africa, and a fragmented market in Africa provides them what they require. And what do they require? Cheap resources, cheap labor, and a cheap market for their goods and a cheap market for their capital. They don't want you to develop the capacity to have your own capital. They don't want you to develop the capacity to build your own industry, to build your own savings, because then you won't need their capital. And if you build your own industry, you won't need their products. And if you've got your own products, you don't need to sell them your resources. This vision is not new. This vision is something that was articulated by people like Marcus Garvey, people like Emilio Cabral, people like Patrice Lumumba, Kwame Nkrumah, and so many other Pan-Africanists who understood that Africa's success is in unity, who understood that slavery happened because Africa was not united. Now I want to go to the last issue. For those of you who keep being told by white people that when we have xenophobia, xenophobia is acceptable because it was there before the white man got here. When people say that the Zulus hated other tribes before the white man got here, it is not true. The Zulu nation was formed in 1710. This was 60 years after Jan van Riebeeck had landed on the land. It is very important to understand this situation. So there was no Zulu nation in 1652. What then caused a group of clans that were peaceful, that interconnected, interrelated, and had relationships and traded among each other to form a tribe, a militaristic tribe? It was because of the interference of the Afrikaner taking land from Xhosas and Zulus that they began to become, from clans that existed, that they began to become tribes in order to have militaristic capacity to fight back. So this whole Zulu nation that went to fight other tribes for land happened after they started losing land after the arrival of the white man. 60 years after the arrival of the white man. Shaka only came into play in 1830. That is 120 years after the Zulu nation had been created. Shaka was brought into existence by the circumstances of white colonization that had started to happen. But before that, there was no reason for a Zulu nation. Before the white man got here, there was no reason for a Zulu nation because we as Africans were able to trade and get resources between each other and stay prosperous. But the prosperity went away once the colonizer got here. Once the colonizer started taking land, started taking cows, poverty became an issue that started to militarize Africans and start to make them pillage and rape each other as they had been taught by the white man, as they had been taught by the colonizer. We need to know our history. So when Zulu people are xenophobic and tribalistic today, it's un-African. You borrowed it from white culture. It is not us. We traded with each other. We were brothers. We were sisters. We never took each other's land. We never killed each other for wealth. It is not African. It is not within our African spirit to kill each other for money, land, or anything else. So what we need to do is let's talk about how we get rid of the colonizer instead of continuing to separate each other in an un-African manner. It is not African for us to hate each other. It's not African for us to not trade with each other and freely travel on our continent. So those who say that no, Zulus were like that before, it's not true. It's an adaptation to white culture. And we cannot hold on to white culture as Africans and think that we are progressive. When we said that colonization came with the partition of the African continent, if colonization came with the creation of the little country territories that we have, why is it that we are an independent continent and we still are partitioned? Why is it that we're an independent continent and we still have little states? Why is it that as an African continent, it's counterintuitive for me to trade freely on my continent, but white men can trade freely without question? Why is it okay for me, a person who trades in Africa and then spends my money in Africa, why is that wrong? Yet a European comes and trades in Africa and takes the wealth and the income and the profits that are made back to Europe. We need to start thinking, ladies and gentlemen. We need to wake up. We need to wake up. There is nothing wrong with a South African being in Nigeria. Today, MTN is one of the biggest companies on the Johannesburg Stock Exchange because 52% of its revenue comes from Nigeria. Don't be righteous. Don't allow your companies to make huge profits, white companies to make huge profits on the continent, but then you don't want other people to make profits in your country. ShopRite, one of its biggest revenue comes from 6 shops in Nigeria. But those are white companies that are trading on our continent. These are white people making money that they externalize and put in foreign bank accounts when it suits them. While we Africans are not trading. You, the South African, are not building townhouses in Zimbabwe. There are townhouses required in Zimbabwe. Zimbabwe requires new, brand new South African style townhouses. South Africa requires non-GMO food. Zimbabwe can provide that to South Africa. We are wasting opportunity, busy pointing at each other, calling each other kwerekweres, instead of waking up and taking the economic opportunity and settling it. Stop laughing at other countries, South Africans. You can take up the opportunities and the problems that are there and solve them and make money. Muziku Malo is getting rich in Zimbabwe while we're busy here. Implat, South African company in Zimbabwe, is its most profitable division is in Zimbabwe. Let's wake up, guys. Let us start uniting. Let black South Africans and black Zimbabweans come together. Let's work together. I have solutions I want to sell to South Africa. I can't sell them because I'm a Zimbabwean. Why won't your government take my solutions, but they're quick to take Microsoft solutions? They're quick to take Intel solutions. And some of these companies that they take solutions from don't even have bank accounts in South Africa. These US companies do not do empowerment. They'd rather pay a tax. These US companies do not have accounts in South Africa, but they take the biggest government contracts. That's not clever. That's not smart. We've got to think differently. Pan-Africanism is our source of freedom. We are still colonized. South Africa is colonized. 14 French colonies are still colonized right now. Zambia is colonized. Nigeria is colonized. Its oil belongs to Total, to Shell. We've got to change that, ladies and gentlemen. And we've got to change it by understanding that unity in Africa, oneness in Africa, black Africans starting to look for opportunity and solving opportunities in other African countries, and unity for us to be able to develop savings and investment banking that will allow you to be financed as a black person on this continent. Europeans are not going to fund you to compete with their companies. Europeans are not going to fund industrialization in Africa. ABSA will not fund industrialization in Africa because they are European. We need African institutions. And we need African institutions that are guided by African rules and African policy. Pan-Africanism, ladies and gentlemen, we need unity. Grace, how are you? Christine, how are you? Robert, hi. Leon, how are you doing? Martin, Mfondini, Sean, Robert again, Tawanda, great to see you, bruh. Willard, hi. Sapphire, what's up, my baby girl? Bernard, how are you, bruh? Lordmore, Smiler, Nkosi. Guys, it's been good. We have to work for Pan-Africanism. In South Africa, understand that it is not only Africans that want opportunity from South Africa. We just need capital in South Africa. But you, if you have capital, there's plenty of opportunity for you in Africa. We need roads. We need townhouses. We need accommodation. We need shopping centers. We need mines. We need mining machinery for small little mining projects. There's so much capital to be made in Africa. But as long as we look at these borders that white people put for us and we're scared to go across them, we're scared to talk to each other, you'll always think that we're here to exploit you. No, there's opportunity in our countries for you. Like I told you, MTN is what it is because of Nigeria. ShopRite is what it is because of Nigeria. You've got to understand this. And you've got to take up that opportunity. It's yours. It's ours. Let's unite. We are not South Africans, Zimbabweans. We're Africans. How do we hold colonial territories in the name of freedom? How do we hold colonial territories in the name of Africanism? European territories in the name of Africanism? We're smarter than that. We went to school to learn to reason. Even though that education was toxic, let's have a new education. Let's stop doing economics that takes resources from the many to a few who happen to be European. Let's change it. Let's give it another concept. Let's take wealth and let's spread it out. Let's take resources and make sure they're accessible to ensure that we're all comfortable in our continent. We cannot be driving BMWs while our brothers don't have food. It's un-African. We don't do that. The reason most of you are paying a black tax is because as Africans, our pain is communal. Our pain, we feel it together. So let us spread our wealth together. We will make more money.